Hey, everybody. The finale for season 3 of The Mandalorian is finally here. We are going to discuss it, share our thoughts right now here on Flicker Effect. Hey, how's it going, Bobby?
Man, it's good. We finally made it to the day, the season finale of The Mandalorian. Like you said, season 3, which it's interesting because I was thinking about this a little bit ago, and I was thinking about how Michelle before this season, it seemed like it was a blur really this season when you think about it, because it seems like it was only a couple days ago that we were talking about how much we were anticipating this season,
Hmm.
and me and you were like super anticipating, and Michelle was like, maybe.
Maybe.
And we were like, what? you know?
What's wrong with you?
And so, yeah, so it's kind of like it's interesting to see where we are now. And I think that it's safe to say that we will be talking spoilers for this episode. So,
Let's go ahead and put that
you
spoiler
know,
icon up there right now. Spoilers.
yes, spoilers. Um, it I would say that for me, this season has been entertaining, but if I were to compare it to the other two seasons, it's not as good as those two seasons. To me, this season, while I enjoyed a lot of it, there's aspects of it that I wish had been done better, and I still to this day wish that it was a longer episode count and longer episode runtime for this show. And I think it would benefit from it in a lot of different ways. In fact, it really does seem like this season finale that we got could have been combined with last week's episode and just had 7 episodes this season and just had this really nice long episode. But overall, I did like this season finale. I felt like it wrapped up this season as far as what they went into it, with the idea of taking back Mandalore. I think that that was the main objective of this season. We had Bo-Katan as a main character throughout this season, and so I think that it really did a good job of giving her a journey and an arc throughout the season. Don't think it did as good a job of giving Din Djarin and Grogu an arc this season. But it seems like by the way that it ended, once we get into season 4, we will sort of be back to status quo of just the two of them and doing further adventures out in space. But overall, I mean, there's a lot of things that I would point to, um, that were lacking in some way. But I thought for me, for at least for what this season finale was attempting to do, that it did pretty much most of it well. I thought visually it looked good. I thought that from the standpoint of, um, what the characters were setting out to do was accomplished. I think that there was the action I thought was really good. There was a few times when there was some fight choreography going on that I was like, "Oh, that was impressive," or "That was cool move that Bo-Katan did." Like I think there was a part where they were fighting, where she was fighting, where they had the big space battle with the Mandalorians and those I don't know what kind of troopers that they're called, those
The
specialized ones,
white
but
troopers.
yeah.
Yeah.
So they were fighting, and then there was a little bit of a break off in the fight when Bo-Katan was, I think, being chased by a couple of them, and she flew over the top of something, slid and came down and fired knee rockets and took them out. And it was that was cool. It was just like there was a
Hmm.
few moments like that, and I also like just some of the aspect of, I don't know what to call it, but you know how have you ever seen where in some Jackie Chan movies where he's fighting and like he'll hit something and it hurts his hand, or he's like, going for something and he doesn't quite get it, kind of thing. I felt like there was a moment like that with Din Djarin when he was fighting and he was going through the sort of like the door gauntlet basically, and he was fighting off a couple of them, and he hit threw the knife and it got the guy in the neck, and the guy was falling off. He tried to grab for the knife, but he missed it, and the guy fell off with the weapon that he could have got to keep going. But I thought that was kind of just a nice little touch. It was like a decent amount of stuff like that with the action that I thought worked really, really well in this episode. And just, I think that it tied up the story pretty well. In terms of the comparison of the last two season finales, season one and season two, I don't think it's as flashy, I would say, as those were. This one didn't have a lot of fan service, and there was a lot of speculation out there about this, that, and the other that would pop up in this episode. And I was kind of happy it didn't, that it just was really more self-contained and about what we had been having throughout this season, and didn't pull some sort of like a I don't know, a cheap pop kind of thing where you just pull somebody in just for the sake of doing it. So I appreciated that they had some restraint there, and didn't just go for something just because it would get a big buzz, and they just really told their story and finished it off in this season. So yeah, ultimately I enjoyed it. I'm not really sure how everyone else online has taken it. I think I've seen some middling ideas behind it in the way that they thought about it, but I think I was pretty satisfied. And I saw there was a Gizmodo headline that kind of summed up this season and episode for me. So I'll just read the headline itself. It said, the Mandalorian finale was a satisfying, straightforward end to a sloppy season. And I would be on board with that. I would agree with that pretty much. So that's my thoughts. What about you?
What about me, huh? So yeah, I mean, in a lot of ways I agree with you when it comes to the season. If this is your first time, watching us so far this season, I have not been thrilled with the way the season's played out, and I was a big fan of the first two seasons of The Mandalorian. The writing, especially to me, seemed kind of lacking this season. There was something missing, and dialogue wasn't very good. And anyway, the last episode, episode 7, I guess, chapter 23. That always throws me off, like the chapter numbers. I always forget. Anyway, chapter 23, I thought was probably the best episode of the season. Actually, yeah. I think pretty easily the best episode of the season. And it's funny, like, I think I had said last week that it felt to me like there was still so much to do to be able to finish this story off, that this episode was not going to end in a way where it was just kind of like all wrapped up and done. Like it almost like I felt like almost 100% sure, like, man, they've got to end this in some way where it's going to be almost like to be continued into season 4, which would have made sense because Jon Favreau has said like he's already written season 4. So I was like, okay, yeah, maybe that's why, totally wrong about that. Like they wrapped it up so much that you could argue, man, was this the end of the show? Like, like, is the show over now? Like, we all know it's not, but I think you know what I mean. I mean, we're talking spoilers. Totally. If you've seen it, like you could not film another season and it would be fine. Like the way the episode ends. Anyway, I thought the episode, kind of like my opinion on a lot of the episodes, it was fine. Like there's a lot of great things in it that I enjoyed, but then when I look at the episode as a whole, the structure of it's not great. There's things I have problems with, decisions that were made in terms of the story that I think could have been better if they had gone in different directions. And it does feel rushed. Like, I saw the run. We talked about this, I think, yesterday, right? When I was like, I saw the runtime that was rumored going around there on the internet. And I was like, really? It's only like 35, 38 minutes. Like, what's going on? Like, but with that said, like, if it was a great show, then fine. Like, if that's all you need, 38 minutes, cool. But I will say, after watching it, I'm like, it does feel like you could have had like an hour episode with what you tried to accomplish in this episode. You mentioned that in a lot of ways it felt like episode 7 and this episode could have been one, and I agree with you. But I would argue, I think that you could have taken like basically the main conflict from episode 7 and episode 8 made that one episode, and then like another episode of kind of the aftermath, like a whole episode of that, really, because once you get to that part of this episode, it just kind of
Mm,
flashes by. Like,
right.
okay, we're at the forge. Okay, we're, or I think first it was the scene with the living
Would that have been
waters.
satisfying, you think, though, if they had done that, like just an episode of what happened after the battle? Because that would have
I
probably would have been knowing them 34 minutes or something, and it
I
would have
know what
just
you
been
mean. Yeah.
yeah.
I I mean, I'd like to think there would have been a way to make it satisfying,
Mm,
but when you see what all they did here, which wasn't much, no, I agree. I think it risks being like feeling like just an extra add-on episode, like
yeah.
kind of like the last part of Return of the King. Like, okay, let's just end this,
Yeah.
Right? But I think they could have done it in a way where that you could have made the aftermath interesting, dialogue with Bo Katan about the dark saber or something, stuff like that.
Yeah.
That would have made a good ninth episode in this season. But I also would argue that they should have started this main kind of storyline earlier in the season as well. I think you've
Yeah.
said the same thing. I mean, we've had a lot of stuff go on in this season that felt really unnecessary, and then each episode would end with like a tease of where we're going. And then the next
Mm,
episode would do the same thing. It'd be like, okay, here's a side story, and then a tease at the end of where we're going with Bo-Katan and Mandalore and everything. So I don't know. I mean, again, there's stuff in this episode that I liked, scenes I really dug. I mean, I think of the scene of like Din trying to go through each section of those troopers where the red,
hmm.
four shields.
Praetorian Guard. Oh no, not the guards.
Yeah, no, the you were
Yeah,
talking
yeah,
about him,
yeah,
the guys in the white armor. I
yeah.
love that shot of him. Like, I don't know why that shot of he gets that trooper that's about to fall, and you see him try to reach for that
Hmm.
pistol, and he just misses it. And there's
Yeah,
something about it. I'm like, oh, that was a pretty cool shot. And I mean, the whole
yeah.
thing was there was a point during that scene I was like, all right, I'm digging this. I don't know why that was well done, and the battle was cool. Like, but again, there's decisions made about stuff, and
Like what?
like I think about, for example, like the dark saber.
Mm,
And I'm saying this as someone who's not. I haven't even seen Rebels, so I'm
yeah.
not even as like what's the word? I don't know, like as invested in
Mm,
the lore of the dark saber as a lot of people. Even though I'm kind of up to speed. I've seen plenty of YouTube videos about what happens in Rebels, and you know what I mean.
yeah.
Anyway, the way
And
this
it.
ends, I think it would have been a
Clone
good
Wars.
opportunity to, instead of the destruction of the dark saber happening and it being like just something that just happens, like all of this like build up about this dark saber, and it's just like Moff Gideon destroying it. I think it would have been a cool like character development opportunity to have Bo-Katan like make a choice about it not being important. You know what I mean? As opposed to it's gone and now she has to deal with it. I mean, yeah, she doesn't cry about it. She doesn't sit there go, oh God, the dark saber's gone. What am I gonna do? Like,
Mm,
I mean, she accepts it, and that's great. So in a way, she kind of gets to make a choice about it, but not really. I think it would have been a good way to develop her character to somehow like have her make a choice that, you know what, this is not important to us as Mandalorians and me leading the Mandalorians to have this dark saber. It's really just all bullshit. Like I think that was one thing that I bumped on. Does that make sense?
yeah, it does. And I think for me, when I saw that, I did question it a little bit, the decision in terms of destroying it. But then I think what kind of made me come around on it was that it felt, in a sense, sort of real in the way that sometimes some things don't have a lot of fanfare when they end. They just end, and it was sort of like it just got crushed in battle. And I was like, yeah, I guess that kind of makes sense. And in that way that it plays out, and I mean, I won't say that we know for sure prior to this episode that the dark saber wasn't around anymore, but you figure it never came up in any of the other movies, sequels, or
Right.
anything else. So I figured it had to maybe have gone somewhere or been lost or something. So
Somehow, yeah.
it yeah, so I guess it made sense to me, but I totally can see how you would want there to be more sort of I guess personal choice in the matter, more agency there for her character to choose that, as opposed to it, the choice being made for her in that way. It was taken out of her hands. I think if I'm bumping up against anything in particular, um, that made a sense to me in my head. But what doesn't make sense to me at this point still, which maybe you can help me kind of clarify it in my head, is I don't understand that. So the armorer wanted Bo to unite, both sides, and uh, be one Mandalore, all on the same side, and
Like,
make
we all
and
need to, like, put aside our little stupid differences if we want to,
right,
like, truly take back Mandalore. We need to do it as one group, and yeah.
yeah. And I also thought in that sense that she was asking her or telling her that the way that they do it is the right way, so that all of them would need to start wearing their helmets all the time. But at the end, you see some of them still have their helmets off and some do. So I don't understand. Is she cool with that now that some of them can
So wait,
still
could you
be?
say that part again? You felt like the armorer was telling her, like, you felt like the armorer was still thinking, though, you guys, I need to convince you guys that you should still wear your helmets all the time. Say that
I
again.
thought maybe she feels like the way that they do things is the way that it's supposed to be done, and she needed Bo, who can essentially walk between both worlds, can have her helmet off and can have it on, to bring people and convert them essentially to being within the way that they do things, and
Oh,
have, like, their way of doing it, and their
okay.
traditions, and be like, always wearing their helmet now, as opposed to, because they would listen to her because she's seen that side of it now, so she could go back and bring them and under that same umbrella. That's what I thought,
I
not
get.
just to bring them back just to retake Mandalore, but also to bring them into their quote unquote religious sect sort of thing.
I get what you're saying now that you say that, but that's not the way I read it as
uh,
that played out in that episode. What was that, episode 6, right? When,
oh,
or anyway, whenever, yeah, that
five,
episode
maybe
that,
5 or 6,
maybe it was
yeah.
5, the episode that ends with, yeah, it was a 5, you're right. The episode that ends when she tells her to take her helmet off. No,
Yeah.
I didn't read it that way. I read it like it was like the armorer was like suddenly I mean, and I think this is like another fault of just the development of the season and the way these
Mm,
characters are not very well developed.
yeah.
Suddenly the armorer is like cool with, I guess, has this quick realization of, hey, if we're going to take back Mandalore, we just need to put aside our differences and work together. That I took it more just like that, not
Hmm.
like, hey, you need to take your helmet off in order to help convince these people to join us, but truly join us and be like a
Mm,
part of our kind of covert or whatever. Like, I didn't take it like that. So I wasn't surprised in this episode
okay.
when it ended, that shot of yeah, at the forge, and every, like, half the Mandalorians have their helmets off still and half of them have them on. I kind of, I expected that.
So then you feel like she's okay with there being that division in terms of people who have the helmets on and people
Yeah.
who don't.
It seems to me like suddenly she is okay, and I guess have
Hmm.
convinced the
Okay.
rest of their group. What is it? The Children of the Watch or whatever.
Is that what it is?
Yeah, down.
I
I'm
forget the
a
name of.
terrible fan right now.
Uh,
I'll look it
oh,
up as we talk. But
yeah. So I that was like more the thing that I remember sort of reacting to, more so than the dark saber. But it is interesting that that was the choice being made there to destroy it. But um, I don't know if it will play a part at some other point in time. But the one thing that I felt like I was kind of Not sure why they flashed to it, or what was the point. Is when they go and Grogu's looking in the water, and then you can see the mythosaur deep underwater.
Oh, yeah.
It's it's like, well, is that saying, I don't know, maybe Grogu senses it there, or is it just he's there and then they just use that as a shot to
Yeah.
go underwater and then show it, and then it's like, okay, well, why are we showing it right now? Like at the
Yeah.
until I
It was more, that felt more like we want to at least acknowledge that we showed you the
we
mythosaur
saw it.
earlier, and
Yeah,
it's still there.
yeah.
Like,
Go.
I don't, I can't explain it any more than that. Like,
Yeah.
and I mean, speaking of that scene, that reminds me of another thing. Like, you go to that scene, and she's, bathing that one child in
Hmm.
the living waters, and then
Ragnar, right? That was Paz Vizsla's
yeah.
son. Yeah.
And then Din walks up with Grogu and is like, okay, I want to he's a foundling, but I want him to be my apprentice. And she
Hmm.
gives him the whole, like, well, he can't talk yet. And then there's the whole thing with basically him adopting him, right? It
Hmm.
feels like it's supposed to be like this moment of like, oh wow, he's adopting Grogu.
Yeah.
But that there's nothing about that worked for me, like in an emotional level of like, oh wow, like it seemed like it was trying to do. Like,
Hmm.
it seemed like it was trying to make me feel like, oh, this is amazing, he's adopting Grogu. Because
Hmm.
one, from my perspective, kind of already had. So I mean, what's
Right.
different? It would be one thing if, as a viewer, I already knew through this show that was like an aspect of their culture. Like, okay, he is just a foundling and he's just helping him out. But then there's like, elders or old, adults that adopt foundlings, and it's a bigger deal. Like, maybe if that was like an established thing,
Mm.
then it would have, that would hold some weight. That'd be like, oh wow, this is cool. Like, but watching it just felt like some weird, like, way for them to go, well, we're gonna make him an apprentice, and we're just gonna make up some more, like, Mandalorian lore, whatever. I can't use words.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and for reasons just to do something that's supposed to feel like a big moment, that is like, oh, okay, like, wasn't he basically already adopted? But all right, whatever. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, I get that. And it kind of goes to a little bit of like when it's like sometimes Den is a little slow in the head or something, because it's like, or at least he
Yeah.
is for our perspective, because they make it formal sometimes for him to do things that he could have done, a long time ago or
Mhm.
whatever. It's like, okay, so now he's presented this, and granted, they're at the in a place where he could be, I guess, bathed in that and taking it, but he didn't technically have to be there. They did it on the other planet with the other kid before he got it, with Ragnar, before he got interrupted the first time. So it's like that with when he had the dark saber, and he could have gave it to Bo-Katan a lot sooner than he did, but he didn't until it came up that
Right.
you're not the real ruler or whatever. And he was like, oh yeah, well, technically. I was like, well, why'd you wait until now? Like, if you could have gave it to her before, like, why does it have to be at this point? But
Yeah. No,
they do
I
things
yeah.
like that with him where you're kind of like, is he thinking all like what's
Right.
sometimes? But um
I
I
guess with that scene in particular, I remember thinking the same thing. And I guess the way I read it in the moment of watching that episode, it was like maybe he's just having a sudden realization of like, wait a second, you know
yeah.
what? Like, this happened, and I'm gonna use this as an excuse to get us past this, because I don't want this thing anyway.
But
I
why
guess,
not write it that way though?
right.
Like he literally could have
Oh,
said,
I'm
hang
not trying to
on.
defend the show too much, trust
No,
me.
I know, but it's
Yeah.
like, but at the same time, he like, literally could have just had him say, hang on a second. Hey, Bo, remember when we were on the planet? And,
Right.
and he could have walked
Yeah.
it through as he's talking
Just
it through his
if you
head
had
and
written the
like
dialogue
literally,
like that, yeah,
yeah.
I
But
agree.
it's interesting, just I think, in that I don't want to get like deep into the weeds of like what they should have done or could have done kind of
Oh, come
thing
on, let's do it.
because
No, I'm kidding.
the
I'm
reason why I
kidding.
don't is because it's like you get into that mode of like, well, they didn't do what I wanted to do, so now I'm
Right.
mad. Yeah, I
No,
don't
I don't
like
want to do that
to
either.
do that. But I think that if this season was about taking Mandalore back, which it was, um there could have been a better use of time getting to know the Mandalorians that were on screen a little bit more,
Hmm.
like Axe Woves and I forget the other one's name, the girl
Oh
uh,
yeah, I can't. I
played
can never
by,
remember her name.
yeah, I forget her name in real life
Yeah.
too, who plays it.
Yeah.
But
Same here.
so you could have got to know her. You could have gone into a little bit of backstory with the armorer or something like that. Would have been more a better use of time in terms of getting to know these Mandalorians to me more so than some of the things that they did spend the time on. And I didn't mind. They could have even done a little bit more with the Katie O'Brien character and the scientist. Like could have stretched that out a little bit more with
Hmm.
that and a couple more episodes, and that would have made it more intriguing and stuff. But yeah, it's just kind of like I do agree that the story. I mean, it definitely could have been used another pass or something in terms of some of the stuff, and I still don't know that if they had more time in terms of episode count and runtime, if they would address the things that we're talking about. I just don't know if the writing or writing team or whatever you want to say has that level of thoughtfulness when it comes to it. I mean, I feel like they do to a certain degree. Um, First season, second season, it felt more, I guess, intimate. So it made it seem like it might have been easier to write because you're mainly dealing with just the two characters and it's easier to write in that sense. And the story wasn't so sprawling in a sense.
Hmm.
But as it became within this third season and there was more story elements introduced, those story elements seemed truncated and not room, didn't give them room to breathe. So I think that's what makes it feel a little frustrating in a way, is that um, when you see them spending time doing other things, you're like, well, I would have liked you to have used this time to give us more of this that you've already presented to us, as opposed to this random, thing that, yeah, is taking up valuable time space that amounts to nothing really. So
Yeah, like that episode. What was it? Episode 3 of, like you mentioned, was it Katie O'Brien?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that episode of going to Coruscant and having that whole like side story about the
Hmm.
cloner. And it's funny because we talked about it right after the episode, and I guess a lot of people were frustrated. Oh, there's some random side story. I don't want to see this. And I mean, I actually overall, standing on its own, enjoyed that story. I thought it was
Hmm.
well told, but now in hindsight, I have to agree. It's like, because to me, it felt like this was good, like kind of setting us up for something, like
Yeah, building.
more more
We'd
than
get more
just
of it.
right. If in the end, it just, I guess it was just setting us up for that she is working for Moff Gideon and she's
Yeah.
just on Coruscant, like lurking around. Like you see the one scene of her with the pilot, and that's it. Other than, I'm like, it felt like, now I have to ask, like, what was the point of that?
Mm.
Like, and it's frustrating. Like, you're right. Like, we could have gotten a lot of development of these Mandalorians. I would have loved a side episode of like history of the armor, like you said, like kind
Yeah.
of flashbacks to her story or something, like let's develop these characters.
Yeah.
I couldn't agree more with you in that regard.
Yeah. It definitely felt like it was more like it bit off a little bit more than it could chew in that respect, in terms of
Hmm.
the ambition that they had for the season. And there was a way that they could have been able to give into what they were doing fully And like you said, in a way, what it comes across as is almost feeling like it was rushed, which you would expect that that's not the case based on how long of a gap we have between last season and this season. So um, it just goes to show, I guess, that I don't know if Dave Filoni was actually busy with Ahsoka during this time, but it kind of seems like it was. And I know that he wrote like at least one episode or maybe possibly two
I think
with
it was just the one, yeah, but
okay, with Favreau. But at the same time, it's like it would not surprise me if later on we found out, yeah, during the production of Mandalorian season 3, Dave was pretty busy with Ahsoka. I mean, it
right.
seems like it would be the case just because of how closely they
It's the
are
timing,
coming
yeah.
out to to each other. So it just makes sense. So I think um, a lot of people out there are disappointed with the season. I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't say I'm disappointed with it. I still was entertained by it. But
I mean, you wouldn't say you were at all disappointed with the result. Like, I get that you could still be entertained with it, but you don't think you're disappointed at all?
I guess not, because I'm trying to think in my head what would I be disappointed by, and I can't think of what I would say I'm disappointed by, other than the things that I mentioned. But I think that um, overall, I enjoyed what they were where they were going with this season, and that it paid off in that way. And like I said, I would love to see more character development and stuff there, but um yeah, I can't think of anything that I would say stands out as me saying that I was disappointed, because I didn't feel disappointed, honestly, watching this season. I felt like it wasn't like, for me this season, let's say, and these are arbitrary numbers because I don't really um I would have to go back and watch the seasons to really like legitimately give them a good number per se. But let's say if season 1 was like a 9 and season 2 was like a 8.5 or an 8, to me this season was like a 7, which is still pretty good. It's, it's decent. It's not terrible. So that's how I kind of look at it. Is like, it's not as good and as high of highs as the first 2 seasons, but I still, was along for the ride and enjoyed it, and didn't come away feeling like I'm mad or upset that they, didn't do certain things, because I guess I just didn't have high expectations in terms of what I literally was expecting for this season. I mean, if anything, Hmm. I guess if anything, I would say I'd be disappointed. Which, if anyone's watching this, then I'm sorry if it makes you upset. But if anything, I would say I'm disappointed that they had to bring Grogu back this season.
Right.
That'd probably be my biggest disappointment, just
But I guess
because.
what I mean, for me, the way I think of it is, in a lot of ways, I'm with you. Like, as nitpicky as I can be about this season and
Mhm.
frustrated as I am about like the way they handled the season on the whole, I mean, it's still Star Wars at a level that I enjoy watching it. I enjoy talking about it. uh, but I guess I can still be disappointed. I'm just still disappointed that it's not as good as the first 2 seasons. Like, I mean, sure, if we were use those same ratings for me, I mean, I would probably rate season 3 a little lower than you are, but not by much. Um, so even though on the whole, like, I enjoyed watching each episode to a degree, like, I still feel
Mm.
like it could have been better. This could have been a much better season.
Oh, I agree. Yeah, yeah,
And in that regard, I'm disappointed in what we got. You
that's
know,
fair.
it
Yeah.
does not feel like seasons 1 and season 2. And no, I mean, I haven't recently gone and rewatched them completely, but I have
Mm.
rewatched some episodes of season 2, semi recently, and they are considerably better. Like, they just are. Like, so That's disappointing to me. I hope season 4 gets us going in a better direction than this. And yes, I agree with you. Like, I know everyone loves Grogu, which reminds me of a side question I have for you. but
Mhm.
I feel the way season 2 ended. We've said this before a million times. I'm gonna say it again.
Yeah.
The way season 2 ended was great. It really felt like a great climactic scene of them having to separate, and they at least needed some more time off. I mean,
Mhm.
Favreau can say all he wants. Well, they've been apart for 2 years. Whatever.
Mhm.
Like, you brought them right back together. I don't know if Favreau was forced to do it or not. Like, we weren't in the
Mm.
room. I don't know, but I think it was a poor decision.
Yeah.
No, the thing it reminds me of, because I'm sure you've seen this a million times. I don't know how you feel on this, but I've read it a million times. I read it again today in an article, I think on, maybe it was Vox, talking
Mm.
about the episode and the season on the whole. And it said this like it was fact, like everyone feels this way. And it, in regards to Grogu's name, like how terrible the name it is. Like,
Grogu?
yeah, I have repeatedly seen people
Ugh,
point out the fact that they hate the name Grogu, and I'm like, why? Like,
yeah.
what? Like, what is
That's
wrong
weird
with the
to
name
me.
Grogu? Like, I just don't understand. Like,
That's weird.
and I only bring it up because I see it so much.
It's
People
weird.
really, and
I'm sorry. That if you
I
have
agree
that
with
take,
you.
I'm sorry. That's a very weird take to me because,
I
like, you told
agree.
me that when you first heard the name Yoda, you were just like, "Oh, that's the perfect name." Oh, I could not imagine. I mean, come on, get out of here! Like, get out of
Right.
here! Like, it's a name. It's whatever. It's
Yeah.
Star Wars to me, and that name. It's not like his name is Jem. I mean, it's like
Yeah.
it's not. It's a Star Wars name. It is what it
I
is.
agree.
And I think that people are just upset that they he has a name and it's just not Baby Yoda, which
I agree
always
too.
it's like nails on a chalkboard every
I
time I hear
know.
Baby Yoda.
He's
It's
not
like,
Baby Yoda.
yeah,
I mean,
it's
unless we were to
weird.
find out indeed he's a clone of
You're
Yoda, but
right.
even then, he's still not Baby Yoda. Like, I
Yeah,
mean, he is, but
yeah.
I don't know. Like, again, I saw that today when I was just kind of poking around, looking at like what the reaction was to the episode, and I'm like,
Hmm.
really? Like, again, this take, and again, it's spoken like it's just like it's fact.
Yeah,
Like, what
I
were they
don't know that
thinking?
that's true.
I'm like, no, it's fine. Anyway, I will say, very happy to see that the IG-12
I was
thing
just about to mention that.
is over. Like
Yeah.
I mentioned before, by the way, for those watching, like the whole Grogu, and I almost said Baby Yoda. Like, it's a weird habit. The whole Grogu IG-12 thing, him driving it around, in one sense, okay, it's kind of cute, but
Hmm.
it very quickly for me was like, okay, this is silly. Like, I'm not a fan of this, and I am so happy that they are not sticking with that as like a thing for him. This is how he's going to get around and do stuff. Like, super happy about it. Now, there's a part of me that doesn't like the fact that IG-11 in some way, shape, or form is kind of back. Like,
Mm.
I mean, again, it's like it feels like a way of just, oh, like, no, forget that whole thing in season 1 where he dies. Like, he's back now. I mean, he's not, I guess. Maybe his memory circuits, I guess, are
Yeah.
gone. It's not really the same android, but you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's a fan servicey thing that I was like,
Yeah.
this wasn't necessary. It's not something that bugs me
I
that much,
agree.
but
Yeah, no, I agree. It wasn't necessary, but
right.
I what I do like about it is that it at least paid that off because it seems so like, hey,
Yeah.
we get this in the beginning, and then he gets what RD5, and then he's just rolling with that, and it's like, well, what happened to the whole IG-11 thing?
Right.
So at least it brings it back around, even if like it was sort of just fan servicey. I was like, okay, but
Did you ever feel like, I forget now, that there was that episode earlier in the season where they were trying to chase that dragon creature that took the kid,
right,
and you get this, I forget exactly how it played out, but basically, their jetpacks only have so much fuel. Like,
yeah,
they can only get so far. And because they kind of did that in that episode, now every time I see Mandalorians flying around, I think about how much fuel do they have? Like, are they going to make
Mm,
it? And I
mhm,
couldn't help but think about that in this. Like, they're flying around a lot. Like,
mhm.
and I mean, he is flying all the way out of the atmosphere,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think, with a jetpack, and that's a whole other thing. If you really want to get technical, that's just crazy. But you know what I mean? Like
yeah,
I found myself thinking about the fact, hey, you guys set up the fact that their jetpacks only have so much fuel. Like I
yeah.
would almost have accepted it. You know what? It's technology. They can just fly indefinitely. Like, I mean, that's silly, but you know what I mean?
Mhm.
But since you guys as a show set it up that they only have so much fuel, now I can't help but go, would they really be able to go that far? Like, you know what I mean? Like it was just something I thought about while watching this one.
I would have to go back and rewatch that, but I thought within that episode, the way that they kind of portrayed it is that that chase, them chasing that bird,
Mm-hmm.
was sort of an all day thing because it began to be starting to get dark, and then they had to like kind of like camp out. So they were started running
Yeah, I
out like
guess
so. It probably I'd have to watch the time frame from when they it
same
first
here.
got took. It might have been morning, but then by the time they run out of fuel, this starts to be a little bit getting towards dark. So,
Right. I'd have to
it,
rewatch that too. I know I didn't
yeah,
I guess I didn't think of it quite that way when I saw it, but I could be wrong.
yeah, yeah. But yeah, I did think of that too when I was seeing him go into the lower atmosphere. I would imagine it had to be that ship must have been in lower atmosphere because I don't really know. I mean, it seems like it was in upper atmosphere, but that
Right.
just seems hard to believe that even with the jetpack, that he could go into upper atmosphere and not get
Yeah. Like at first
crushed.
I'm like, is he really just gonna go all the way up there with a jetpack? I'm like,
Yeah,
wow, that's cool. Okay.
yeah,
That's fine. I
but
mean,
yeah, it seems sort of like okay, well, it is what it is. Some things it's
right.
like in Star Wars within any almost anything there's probably some rare exceptions but with almost anything you can look at it and be like really and kind of scratch your head and
Mm.
you're like I don't know like is that
Oh
a
yeah.
so that's one of those ones that I kind of sort of uh, throw it up to that and it's like really I don't know but okay like all right and
Right.
I thought it was funny how there was what okay, I don't know how to describe this exactly, but it just seemed odd to me. Last week's episode, there was a scene where um I think it was either Axe or Bo had was talking to oh no, maybe it was the armorer where they were going back and she was taking back some of the people who were wounded and there was that guy that was sitting in the captain's chair or whatever of the
Oh
ship
yeah. Yeah.
and it seemed like in that last week's episode it like hung on him for a few seconds for some reason. I don't know why but it hung on him for a few seconds before it switched to another scene. And then in this week's episode, when Axe gets up there and he's like, ushering everyone out and whatever, once again, it kind of hangs on him, but he's sort of looking back at Axe. I think he's like wondering if he's maybe getting out. But at the same time, it just sort of gave him some level of prominence, but he was like, kind of like, I won't say a nothing character, but he wasn't doing much other than just sort of
Right.
sitting around. So it was like weird the way they kind of had with his character. I was like, well, what are they doing? Because I was starting to think about how all the online talk this
Oh man, I
past
know where you're
week
going with this, and I wanted to bring this up too. But go ahead.
had been about the episode 7 title called Spies.
Spies.
And so we see Katie O'Brien's character is exposed and that, she was not really reformed and she's still working with Gideon.
Right.
And then so people are saying, well, that's just one person.
Yeah,
So
who
who's
this
the other
it said
spy?
spies, so there's gotta be
Yeah.
another one.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
so everyone was, I'd say the big money seemed to be on the armorer.
Armor.
And then a lot of people thought maybe it was Axe.
Right.
and so when I was watching it, and I was like, oh, maybe. And so I'm watching it thinking I'm waiting for someone to turn in the middle of battle or something, and and it doesn't come, and I just couldn't help but laugh because I just
I'm
was
with you,
like,
man.
all you guys that speculate to
Everybody.
the every little
Dude, every
nitty
other YouTube
gritty.
video I came across was
Yeah.
about like, or TikTok, scrolling through TikTok. I don't know how many TikTok videos I've seen of
Yeah.
people going, "Oh no, you're wrong about the armor. This is why it's this person. This guy's the
Yeah.
spy."
I couldn't help but laugh because
Oh, I
I'm like,
know.
man, the way they theorize, and it's like
Mhm.
most of the time they're not even think. I mean, and it's not just like with Star Wars; it's with Marvel stuff in terms of anything that they think of. Oh, this person's gonna pop up, and here's why we think that this is in. And it's like, I get it, because yeah, it's fun to theorize, but a lot of these guys theorize to the point where if it doesn't happen that way, then it's trash. And it's like,
Yeah,
come on. I mean, you just made up a whole scenario based off a title that's called
of a title.
Spies. And I get it. It's like, well, we did only see one, and why make it plural? But whatever. It's like, um, I didn't I didn't get mad that the name of this week's episode was The Return, and at the end of the episode, there wasn't a stinger with Thrawn coming back, returning. I mean, it's like
Yeah,
you could have made a point for like, oh, the return, and you could have been thinking like, who's coming back? Is Luke coming back? No, it was just a title. It just meant they were returning back to
turning to
Mandalore,
Mandalore. Yeah,
basically. So you can't read too much into the titles. Just like whatever.
yeah. No, because after that episode, Spies or The Spies or whatever, and I started to see that same kind of talk. It was funny to
Mm.
me because I hadn't even considered that. But then the talk all around the internet was like so matter of fact, like, okay,
Hmm.
so there's got to be another one. And I'm like, oh, does there? I mean, okay, I guess there could be. I
Yeah.
get it. I guess it makes
Right.
sense. It's called Spies,
Yeah.
but it's not something I had thought of. But you're right, man. Like out there, the chatter was just again so matter of fact. Like, oh man, this is who it is. There's got to be another spy, and this is why this person. And there's no doubt, you know, in certain respects, the armorer, because she is so mysterious, was like they're a little sus. Like, what's going on with
Hmm.
her? Like, you get that shot of her taking the people back, and was she just getting out just in time? Like, but then
Hmm.
there's other evidence of like that makes zero sense that she would be a spy because Moff Gideon would have known that this happened and that happened. And anyway, no, I thought the same thing when no spy turned up. I thought it was hilarious. I'm like, this is
Yeah.
fantastic.
Yeah. It's so good.
It makes me so happy.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I do think that next season we will probably get more of a return to form. And that's the thing that's I find interesting about it is because like Favreau said he had already written. I mean, I can't remember if he said he's written all of season 4 or that season 4 is written, in the sense that like, okay, it's sort of mapped out, but not
Right.
like actually scripted sort of thing. But um, it's it's to me, this was their plan. It wasn't like, oh, okay, um, we know they like this, so we're going to give them more of this, and then now that this season is ended, they're going to say, okay, well, they didn't like that, so we're just going to bring it back to just Grogu and Din. Well, clearly by the season finale, you see that they're not course correcting based on what they've heard back. That was already the plan, that they were in for a grand adventure in season 3, and now season 4. It seems like it'll be back to basics, where it's just a couple of them, or at least it seemed that way. Obviously, there's got to be more to it, and it'll build, because I don't know this, but it seems like maybe that season would happen before that Filoni movie that would
I would think
address
so.
the whole thing of everything culminating. So yeah, I imagine it will still build into something pretty big based on
Right.
that.
Yeah. I've seen that too. Like, oh, is is this like the way this ends kind of confirming that there must be another season before that movie? And I guess
Mm,
I also, from Celebration, I mean, I don't think we were given like definitive timelines of when that film's going to
no,
happen. And I kind of was given I felt coming out of that announcement, I'm like, we're not getting that movie anytime really soon.
no,
Like, I don't think they'd even go into production on that probably for a while. That seems
no.
like more of an in game thing for what they're doing here with the Disney Plus stuff in the New Republic era. But I could be wrong. We'll see.
When would you guess that we would get a fourth season of The Mandalorian then?
Oh man, I don't know. So right now it's April. They haven't even gone into production yet. I would imagine we probably wouldn't get it until like the fall of 2024 or something.
Really?
It wouldn't shock me.
Huh. That's interesting. I was thinking probably like around this time of
Of
2025.
2024. Oh, of 2025.
Yeah.
Oh, like later.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Yeah. I was thinking definitely
Oh,
like,
man, it could, but I don't know. I would
because you
take
figure
the
we're in April of 2023 now,
3. Yeah.
and I can't imagine them starting to shoot this season 4 until at least like maybe September this
Right. I
year.
would agree. But I mean, I think if they started shooting in September, they they would have it ready by the next in a year from then. I mean, hey, they're not even shooting that
I
much
think
content.
they
The episodes are 30 minutes long. Come on.
I think they could have it ready, but I feel like maybe they might not release it until then, because maybe that's when that summer, or maybe actually that winter, because they would probably release the Star Wars movie around December, around Christmas.
You think
That
we'll get that movie in 2025?
I'm thinking. Well, no, I think that movie, if I really think about it, I probably think it would come 2026, probably.
Okay. I was gonna say I would be shocked if we get that in 2025.
Yeah, yeah. I don't think it'd be 2025. So, and I know they wouldn't wait until 2026 to give us a fourth season of Mandalorian.
To me,
That'd be
if
wild.
I had to bet, I would venture to guess we would get the Ray movie first. I know they're not
Yeah,
affiliated with each
I'm
other
thinking
other
the
than
Ray
being in
movie
Star
comes
Wars,
out in
but
25.
right. Yeah, I would agree with that.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
then we get that one in 26.
And I
So
think the Mangold film is who knows when.
yeah,
I don't know that we really like. I mean, now we're kind of slightly going off subject, but I don't know if we really talked about this aspect of those announcements last week. But it's like we get these announcements and it's great,
when
but it's still stuff that to a certain regard and to a certain point I can't get that excited about because it's like you guys have announced lots of stuff in the past,
yeah.
and I know, like,
Hmm.
according to Kathleen Kennedy, she'll point to the Feige thing as not being very official, and there was really nothing there. But there was other stuff that was official, like the Benioff and Weiss was an official announcement. Ryan Johnson was an official announcement, and she can say all she wants. Oh well, Ryan Johnson's just very busy, and I'm like, so is everybody else. Like,
Yeah.
hey,
Well, did you?
Mangold dude's very busy. Like,
Yeah, like he's got another movie he's doing before
he's
he would
doing
do.
Swamp Thing at some point. He's doing some
Well,
other movie.
so
Yeah.
he would do. I think I read somewhere where he said that, or I don't know if he said it. I won't. I'll take that back. But I think I read somewhere where it was said that he would do Swamp Thing after he did the Star Wars movie, but the Star Wars movie would come after his next movie, which is I want to say it's Chaplin. I can't remember.
Yes, I think you're right. I think it is
Okay,
Chaplin.
yeah. So it would come after that one. So yeah,
Okay.
but that it's still like you said, you just don't, you never know. And it's funny, did you read that thing about when Kathleen Kennedy said the thing about Kevin Feige, and people dug up like the article or something where it was Alan Horn or someone
Oh, I heard about
or
that. Yeah.
who actually had said that
Had it.
Kathleen Kennedy or that Kevin Feige's making a movie with Kathleen Kennedy and
Hmm.
a Star Wars movie or whatever. And so it's like, well, it wasn't something that the newspaper or the media put out there. It was
Right.
it came from within Disney.
I mean,
But
it may not have been an official like press release announcement,
right.
but this didn't come from nowhere. Like,
Yeah.
and it clearly, if Alan Horn's saying this, she's in saying she was involved. I'm sure she was involved. And
Right,
for
exactly.
her to basically say like, no, there was nothing there. You guys basically are like, no,
Yeah.
at that point you're lying. Like,
Yeah, right.
you know, yeah. Anyway, I was trying to think if there was other stuff about this episode that I wanted to talk about, and I feel like I'm forgetting stuff. But I guess I'll just say again, like, it was good to a degree, but I still have problems, and I feel like it's kind of reminiscent of the rest of the season for me.
Mm,
Like I was disappointed in this season. I wish it could have been a lot better. And it's funny too. Like when right after I saw it early this morning before I went to
mm,
work, and
me too.
I did do some Twitter searching. Just kind of I saw the hashtag was trending, so I was just digging through that. And I mean, I will say at least if I base my the reaction of people just on that, I mean, I would say 99% of the tweets I was seeing were extremely positive.
Okay.
Like, and I mean, to all those people, that's great. Like, this is definitely not a situation where I look at this and go, how can you people like this? Like, if for those of you who enjoyed it, like
Mm,
that, I think that's fantastic. I'm glad you enjoyed it more than I did. um,
yeah.
but then yeah, then I started watching some, YouTube reactions from people I follow, and then I started to see more opinions, I think similar to ours, where I was like, okay, I'm not crazy. That's good.
Mm. Do you think that though goes to like the general audience versus the more in this space audience kind of thing? People who are more, I won't say critical, but they're not just the average Joe when it comes to Star Wars kind of material. Like, oh, there's a new Star Wars thing. Okay, and I'll watch that. Like those people seem like for them, and I'm not saying that there aren't hardcore Star Wars fans that didn't watch this and came away feeling like it wasn't great. They could have still
Mhm.
thought it was really good too. But I wonder if it was a lot of people who are more like quote unquote the general audience, like how you go into the movies, where the people who are more plugged into, like, for instance, Marvel movies
Mhm.
can say, "Oh, Phase 4 wasn't, as good as I had hoped, or as good as the other phases were." Whereas a general audience just goes in and they're like not really having too high of an expectation, and they come out and like, I really thought that was good. And you're like, what? Like, looking at them like they're
Right.
crazy kind of thing. So I don't know. Do you wonder, like, because you were saying you were on Twitter. So,
Right.
and I imagine that those aren't people you normally would see, as opposed to like how you said on YouTube when you saw like the people that are in this space and kind of more in tune to a lot of the Star Wars lore and the series and different
Mhm.
stuff like that. So I'm curious if maybe that is what you kind of saw. It's like almost critics versus a general audience kind of thing in a way.
Yeah, no, I know what you mean. There's
Yeah.
times where it's like, in one respect, I'm not a critic,
No.
like I'm just a fan. Yeah, I'm a big Star Wars fan, but I'm not even a completionist Star Wars fan. There's
Mm,
sadly things I haven't even watched. Anyway, um, but there's times where I'm like, am I like coming at this stuff from a bad perspective? Because clearly there's people that just seem to be able to enjoy it. Like I think about that. But yeah, I mean, I agree. All the people I was seeing on Twitter, I don't know who they are. Like,
yeah.
they're not people I even follow. It was just like
Mm,
searching the
yeah. That's
hashtag
what I
and
mean.
that was trending and just seeing random people reacting to it. And And a lot of those reactions, by the way, were very positive about they were like people using GIFs to explain how excited they were when Din is
Oh,
adopting Grogu. Oh my
right.
god, this is so amazing. And I'm like, really?
Yeah.
Like, what's the big deal about that?
Yeah.
um, anyway, yeah, I know what you mean. Like, oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. Yeah, I'll come
No,
back.
that's all. But then that reminds me, by the way, side note, like, and I guess this is something maybe about Mandalorian lore I just don't understand. But like, what was it? Paz Vizsla, right? That was his
Hmm.
name, right? That died in
Mhm.
episode 7.
Mhm.
And it's our understanding. It's like, what is that? Like House Vizsla, like
Yeah.
coming down through the ages from what
Mhm.
was it Tar Vizsla? That
Oh, I don't recall.
anyway, it's a last name or a house name that seems to have
Yeah.
passed down. And then here it's like Grogu takes Din, and that threw me off. I was like, wait, what? Why Din Grogu? Like, would it not be Grogu Jaren? Like, you know what I mean? Did you think about
I
that at all?
I did not, because and this could be me not remembering things correctly. I fully admit that, but I could have sworn that. Yeah, see, now I know. Now I know I'm probably not remembering this right, but this is why it didn't bump up against it, is because I thought in my head canon at some point they explained that a foundling's name is Din, and that's or something like that. I
Oh,
exactly, I don't know. I thought that was like that's the name that they give a foundling. The first name was Din or something, but I'm probably making that up. So, but that's why I didn't think about it, because I thought it was a sort of a common name that they give to foundlings as a because they don't know uh, their house
I'm
or
gonna
whatever.
see if I
So,
can look this up really fast
oh, I'm
for that.
sure that's not right. I don't know where I got
I
that
don't
from.
remember that.
I don't know where I got
I
that
will say
from.
a quick Google is not like jumping.
Yeah, I
Nothing
know.
is jumping out as like an explanation of that.
But
So
now that you
I'm gonna let
say
that
that
go.
and I think about it, yeah, you're right. I don't know why it'd be dead uh Grogu and not Grogu Jaren. It just
Yeah.
seems
Other
yeah.
than the fact that Din Grogu sounds better,
Yeah, right,
you
exactly.
know,
Yeah,
and sadly, I could see that being the reason that
yeah.
literally the way this show has been written, at least this season. I hate to sound mean, but it
No.
would not shock me if it was just like, Grogu Jaren does sound pretty silly. Let's just go with Din Grogu. And
Yeah.
some Mandalorians, the last name, the name, the house name is the second name, and some it's the first name.
You're right.
It's probably the explanation that we'll get. You know,
Yeah, you can make up the rules as you go if you don't know them, I
exactly.
guess. There was a couple things I did want to mention, and
Hmm.
um, one is just going back to something you mentioned earlier as far as being disappointed. And I think that when you said that you were disappointed, especially in thinking about how well season 1 and 2 were in your estimation in terms of how much you enjoyed them, I think that when I compare them, yeah, I'm disappointed that it's not as good as those 2 seasons. But I think my point of comparison doesn't come from the 2 previous seasons of the Mandalorian, which it probably should. Um, but I think that the way in my head that I was comparing it is, well, the last 2 series we got, I was disappointed in those. It's like when it comes to
Oh,
Obi-Wan
Obi-Wan, yeah.
and Book of Boba Fett, I was disappointed in those. And then to get this, it's like, okay, this wasn't like that. I didn't feel like that when I came away from those. And so that's why I felt like it wasn't disappointing to me, because I didn't have the same feeling after watching this season as I did after
I get that.
watching Boba Fett and yeah, Obi-Wan. So
Okay, yeah, I understand that because I agree. I mean, do I? I guess I hadn't thought about that. Like, is this season of The Mandalorian like better than Obi-Wan was or Book of Boba Fett?
mm,
Yeah, yeah, it is. So I get what you mean.
yeah, yeah. And the other thing I wanted to bring up real quick was that I wonder if with uh, Moff Gideon's plan, as far as him cloning himself and
Mhm.
trying to have it with the Force as sort of that missing element in terms of making this perfect clone with Mandalorian armor and skills and the abilities of a Force user. I wonder if that was their way of trying to include midichlorians without saying midichlorians. Because how else would you be able to isolate the Force into a person uh, outside of adding a high midichlorian count to them so that they be more Force acceptable?
I guess I see what you mean. Yeah. I mean, yeah, I hadn't thought about that. I guess to me it was, and I guess this is still playing into what you're saying, but I mean to me it was like it was a very quick, kind of poorly wrapped up explanation of why we were trying to capture Grogu in the first place,
Hmm.
right? And it did feel that was another thing that felt like, hey, we've all basically this show has always been building to like these people want to get Grogu, and Din was preventing it from happening and keeping Grogu safe, and then the payoff is this kind of quick, like, yeah, I'm trying to clone like people who are force sensitive, and now he's dead and it's all gone. Like, I don't know. It felt a little anticlimactic, but yeah, I could see where it's like uh midichlorians would have maybe more naturally been brought up is like somewhere in this show when it came to the dialogue about the cloning of people, like that would have come up, and I guess they're scared of talking about it because
Right.
people don't like it, like,
Yeah, so like a bad word, really.
which, now as a longtime Star Wars fan since the original trilogy, I mean, I don't have a problem with it. Like, it's
As
part of
much
Star
now,
Wars.
I don't. I
I
know I
don't.
had a huge problem with it back in the day.
I do agree with you. Sure. Like
Yeah.
when it came up in Phantom Menace, I remember being like, do we need this explanation?
Right.
Like why is this a thing?
Yeah.
But I think we both listened to or read that one book about Plagueis, right? And it comes up a lot
Mhm.
in that.
Mhm.
And I thought that it was well handled in that book. Um, yeah. So now it's like one of those things of just acceptance, and I'm fine with it. but
Yeah.
I agree with you. At first I did have a problem with
Yeah. And I could easily see how if you start connecting the dots, because it sounds like I, I'd have to go back and rewatch it, but it sounds like he was successful in being able to get that force ability into
or at
these
least
clones.
he thinks he was.
Or at least he thinks he was. He never got a chance, I guess, to test it for
Right.
sure because they got killed. But I'm wondering if you can lead some sort of direct correlation between that and then Snoke, because Snoke was a Force user, right? But he was a clone, and so
Right.
maybe some of that research or whatever gets in falling into
Yeah.
that.
Because what the Project Necromancer is brought up in episode 7.
Yeah,
So there definitely
yeah.
does seem to be as like a tie-in kind of like helping explain the stuff that was done in that Disney trilogy. It was called the Disney
Hmm.
trilogy of films.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I agree. And that is one thing,
But
by the way, I I do like, as much as I'm unhappy with that Disney trilogy of movies on the
mhm.
whole. um One thing I do like to see in stuff like this, content like this, like these shows on Disney Plus that's taking place before those films, is stuff that I feel like does kind of, man, my brain, what's the word?
Mm,
Kind of adds a little bit to,
mm.
the stuff we end up seeing in those movies, like the
Like
guards, for
Clone Wars
example.
did.
Like, yeah, I guess like Clone Wars did, but like here, you get the Praetorian guards that
Hmm.
appear in a different look and form, but it's like, oh,
Right.
okay. Like these weren't just random red armed guys that Snoke had around him.
Yeah.
like let's
Yeah.
set up that this was kind of a long standing like force of guys, right?
Yeah.
That was cool. And yeah, like the mentioning of Project Necromancer and the cloning that happens within this series so far is like, I feel like an attempt to like, let's at least set up stuff where maybe when all's said and done, when we get done telling all this stuff in the New Republic, we'll look at, Rise of Skywalker and go, okay,
It'll make more sense.
it'll
It'll
make a little
feel a
more
little bit
sense of
better.
how we got there.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
for now, it's like, what the F? Like, you know what I mean?
Oh, absolutely. And that reminds me of another thing that is like, as much as when people say Baby Yoda is nails on a chalkboard to me for Grogu,
Yeah.
the other nails on a chalkboard thing to me is whenever someone says um, that the opening crawl for episode 9 says somehow Palpatine returns. It never says that. It's just become a thing that people say that somehow
Yeah.
Palpatine returns.
Well, because
That,
what's
but
his name says it in the film,
yeah, but it's
um,
not said in the opening
not in
crawl.
the opening crawl.
It
No.
literally says the dead speak, and that's all it says. It doesn't say anything about that. And then
Oh,
it's like, okay, we know in the way people will frame that somehow Palpatine returned. Yes, it's said in the movie, but of course the character wouldn't know how. But we as the audience know how he returned. Even if it's poorly done, we get the idea of clones. They've done them since the prequels. So we know what cloning is. We know how he returned. It's just they don't
right.
get into the nitty gritty details of how that happened. So it's like
Hmm.
it bothers me that people play dumb in that way of like, oh, and somehow Palpatine's back. You know how he's back. Come on, like
I guess,
what are we doing?
yeah. I mean, I see that meme a lot, thrown
Yeah,
around of when Poe Dameron says that line about, how somehow and people use it as kind of an example of the broader problem with those movies. Like, let's just, hey,
right.
somehow he's back. But I
Yeah,
agree with you. Like, there is some explanation given to how he's back, but at the same
it's just not the
time,
best.
it's not the best. Like, it does, the whole bringing him back, I think a lot of us can agree is a terrible decision. Like
Hmm.
just stupid. And it does feel like the Poe line is like a good kind of, encapsulation of that, of like, somehow he's back, I guess. Like,
Executed poorly, I would say.
yes. Yeah.
Because I remember at that celebration when Ian McDermott appeared and he was doing the laugh, and
Oh, it was
after they
exciting.
show, yeah. So I had no
Yeah,
problem with them bringing him back. It's
I
just
agree.
when you see the product of how it was done, it just was not executed
You're
the way
right.
it
That,
was.
I guess I shouldn't say like just bringing him back in general was a poor idea, because I'm with you. Like that announcement at Celebration, everything. It was like, oh my god, this is so cool. Like I don't
Yeah,
know how this is happening, but this is so cool. And
yeah,
but yes, the execution is not great.
yeah,
It feels like it's just very like, we need to bring him back because that'd be
yeah.
cool, right? But how are we
Right.
gonna do this? Like,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
But
So
like stuff that's going on in the show seems like it adds something to that, of like, oh,
yeah,
okay, cool. Like they've been planning this for quite a long time. Like people in the Empire were so desperate to have basically him again. Like they were working on this immediately, because again, it's not like cloning is new to this universe. I mean,
yeah.
obviously. So,
Exactly. And to me, what this Mandalorian universe or whatever could be doing is basically the old equivalent of a phrase you don't hear as much anymore, but used to be so true in terms of a saying, is that all of this is for what the sequels will eventually that we see is them basically doing the whole fix it in post. That's what they're doing by having these series, is they're
yeah.
fixing the sequels in post
Post. Yeah.
because they're making it to where this is better and it
And
improves
I'm
what
here for
we
that.
actually
Like
saw.
that's fine.
Yeah, I don't mind
Because
it.
the fact is that stuff is canon. It exists. It ain't going
Yeah,
away. So
yeah,
I'm all for having series that make it better. I
yeah,
think,
exactly.
I mean, in certain regards, those movies aren't going to get better. They're the same movies. You know, Rise of
Sure.
Skywalker is always, in my opinion, going to be probably a pretty terrible movie. But I'm all for having stuff that at least enhances the story there.
Yeah, yeah,
Absolutely.
exactly.
But you're right. Fixing in post, that's a good way of putting it.
Yeah.
For sure. Anything else? How
No,
about
I think that covers it.
yeah, I think it covers it. We got Ahsoka coming up in
Yeah.
August.
Yep. Yep.
I'm pumped about that.
Yep. Me
But
too.
what big Disney Plus show do we have next
Secret
after this?
Invasion, I believe.
Oh yeah. When and so and I mean that's we're out of time, so I don't
June, I
want
want
to
to say.
well what I was gonna say is I don't want to open up a Pandora's box of Loki 2 and what's happening there, but
Hmm.
I don't remember when that was supposed or is still supposed to
Oh
release.
yeah, I don't recall the gosh.
I
Yeah, I
think
don't
that's
recall the date for that one, but I know as far as what we have next, as far as Disney Plus goes, well, technically speaking, I guess the next thing we would have would be Star Wars Visions, and then I think we got Secret Invasion, and then at some point in time, I don't know if Loki comes out before or after Ahsoka, where it's scheduled, or if it's even scheduled.
I mean, a quick Googling, somebody points to the San Diego Comic-Con 2022, like five slate, and it
Mm,
sounded like Loki 2 would be in summer of 2023.
mm.
And it was my impression that was relatively soon. But
Oof.
I don't know. Now with things that are taking
Yeah,
place,
yeah.
I don't know where we stand there. So
We'll see how it goes.
we will see how it goes. But yeah, if you don't have anything else, I guess we'll go ahead and wrap things up. As always, we would love to hear back from everybody listening and watching. You can leave questions or comments down below. If you're watching us on YouTube, make sure to like and subscribe, hit the bell icon to be notified whenever we go live or post any videos in the future. You can also find us on Instagram and Twitter at Flickr_effect. With that, I am David Lott.
And I'm Bobby Jackson.
Thanks for listening and watching, everybody. Bye bye.